It all began on a spring evening in Manhattan. The grand ballroom of the historic Waldorf Astoria gleamed under chandeliers, golden decor, and the soft murmurs of New York's elite. It was the annual spring charity gala, hosted by the influential Monroe Foundation. The guest of honor, and expected first dancer, was none other than Ethan Monroe, a wealthy entrepreneur known as much for his fortune as for his tragic past. Ethan, 42, stood alone near the edge of the dance floor, a glass of red wine in hand. His suit was impeccable, his posture perfect, but his face was distant, untouched by the buzz of the crowd. Ever since his wife Grace died in a car crash 3 years earlier, Ethan had withdrawn from society, especially from any event involving dancing, something he and Grace had loved deeply. Tradition dictated that the Monroe Gala begin with a waltz led by the host. But for the 3rd year in a row, Ethan refused. Guests whispered behind champagne flutes. Some were confused, others annoyed. "He's still not over it," murmured one. "He should at least honor the tradition," whispered another. Claire Whitmore, an old friend of the Monroe family and longtime chair of the foundation, approached him with concern. "Ethan, your father never missed this dance. People are starting to notice." He responded softly but firmly. "Times change, Claire. I'm here. That should be enough." Meanwhile, near the staff entrance, something entirely different was happening. Maria Sanchez, a longtime janitor at the hotel, had just arrived for her evening shift. With her was her 16-year-old daughter, Emily, dressed in a simple pale blue dress. Her school's spring dance had been canceled just hours before due to a water pipe burst in the gym. Seeing her daughter so heartbroken, Maria had decided, on impulse, to bring her along to the ballroom, just for a minute, just to see how beautiful it all is, she whispered. But before they could sneak a peek, they were stopped by the event coordinator. "This area is off limits. Please take your daughter out the back," the woman said curtly. Emily, mortified, looked down at her shoes. But from across the ballroom, Ethan had noticed. The contrast of a simple dress against a sea of designer gowns caught his eye. But more than that, it was the look of disappointment on the girl's face. Something stirred inside him. He moved across the floor without hesitation. "Is everything all right here?" he asked calmly. The coordinator straightened up. "Mr. Monroe, no issue. Just an employee misunderstanding." Maria, blushing, tried to explain. "Sir, I'm sorry. My daughter's school dance was canceled. She just wanted to see the decorations. I didn't think it would bother anyone." Ethan looked at Emily, who couldn't meet his eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," she replied softly. "Was this supposed to be your first dance?" She nodded. There was a long pause. Then Ethan, to everyone's shock, including his own, said, "Well, there's still time for one." The coordinator's jaw dropped. Maria tried to protest. "Mr. Monroe, please, we don't belong." But he turned to Emily with a smile and extended his hand. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Emily looked at her mother, who hesitated. Then, silently, Maria gave a small nod. Emily placed her trembling hand into Ethan's. The room went still. Every guest turned to watch as Ethan Monroe, billionaire, widow, recluse, led a janitor's daughter onto the dance floor. The orchestra picked up the melody again, slowly. At first, Emily stumbled, uncertain of her steps. But Ethan gently guided her, whispering, "It's just 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. I've got you." Gradually, her tension melted. Her posture straightened. She smiled. "I'm doing it," she said quietly. "You're doing great," he replied. Across the ballroom, Maria stood near the entrance, eyes glassy with tears. She hadn't seen her daughter smile like that in weeks. Around her, the whispers began, some disapproving, others moved. The dance ended to quiet applause. Ethan bowed slightly and walked Emily back to her mother. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Emily," he said with a respectful smile. "Thank you, Mr. Monroe," she replied, barely able to contain her joy. That was the best first dance I could have dreamed of. Maria held her daughter close. We should leave. Thank you for your kindness, sir. But Ethan shook his head. Actually, would you both join me for dinner? I believe the evening is just beginning. Maria's eyes widened. Sir, we can't. I'm in uniform. She's not dressed for... Ethan raised a hand. No one will say a word. Not tonight. Emily looked up at her mom with pleading eyes. Maria hesitated, then nodded slowly. And as Ethan led them both toward the head table, guests around the room shifted in their seats, eyes full of shock, curiosity, and in some cases, resentment. The whispers swirled louder, but Ethan didn't look back. Dinner at the Monroe Foundation Gala was always a formal affair. 5 courses, impeccable service, and conversations that usually revolved around hedge funds, Ivy League schools, and summer homes in the Hamptons. But that night, everything felt different, especially at the head table. Ethan Monroe, flanked by Maria and her daughter Emily, pulled out chairs for them as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The room watched in stunned silence. Some guests offered polite, stiff nods. Others stared openly, whispering behind linen napkins. Emily sat straight, unsure where to place her hands. Maria looked like she might vanish into her chair from embarrassment. But Ethan, calm and composed, leaned in and asked, Emily, what do you like to study? That simple question unlocked something in the girl. She lit up. I love math and science. I'm in the robotics club at school. We're building a prototype for a sensor-based walking cane for the blind. It's not perfect, but it works. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke. I want to be an engineer. Maria's face softened with pride. She didn't say much, but her eyes never left her daughter. One of the guests, Richard Beck, a longtime donor and board member, sipped his wine with a smirk. Engineering, huh? That's ambitious. These programs are fun in school, but real engineering requires connections and credentials. Ethan looked him in the eye. It also requires passion, and I haven't seen this much of it at this table in a long time. Richard looked away. Emily continued talking about her favorite science fair, the time she accidentally fried a circuit board, and how she taught herself basic coding online. For once, the head table wasn't filled with polite small talk. It felt alive. Then came dessert, chocolate mousse with raspberry coulis, the perfect moment for subtle power plays. Claire Whitmore approached the table, smiling like a politician. Ethan, darling, introduce me to your guests. Ethan stood. Claire, this is Maria Sanchez. She's been working at the Waldorf for over a decade, and this is her daughter Emily, future engineer, robotics expert, and tonight's first dancer. Claire blinked. How lovely, she said, not quite masking her shock. I didn't realize the staff's families were invited. They are now, Ethan replied, without missing a beat. Maria blushed deeply. Sir, I appreciate your kindness, but we really don't belong here. You do, he said gently, maybe more than most. As the main hall settled into the rhythm of small talk and music, Ethan leaned closer. I want to help. The Monroe Foundation supports education, but not enough students like Emily get the chance to shine. I want to change that. Maria was quiet. She won a statewide science competition. There's a national final in Chicago next month, but we can't afford the trip. I've been trying to save, but... Ethan didn't let her finish. Then let's make sure she gets there. Emily's eyes widened. Wait, what? I mean it, Ethan said. I'll make it official. We'll create a new fund, travel scholarships for students with big dreams and small budgets. Seated across the table, George Carrington, the foundation's finance director, looked alarmed. That's not in our current scope, he said carefully. Then maybe it should be, Ethan replied. Let's draft a proposal by next week. The shift in tone was unmistakable. This was no longer a dinner, it was a declaration. Maria glanced around, still unsure if they were welcome, but when she caught Emily's smile, Wide, genuine, free of the weight she often carried, she felt something she hadn't in years: hope. As the music swelled again, Ethan turned to Maria. "May I ask you for one more favor?" She looked confused. "Yes?" He stood and once again offered his hand. "Would you join me for this dance?" Maria's eyes widened. "Oh, I haven't danced in years. I wouldn't know what to do." "Neither did I until tonight," he said with a kind smile. From the other side of the table, Emily grinned. "Do it, Mom." So for the second time that evening, the ballroom fell silent. As Ethan led Maria to the floor, guests whispered again. But this time, their eyes weren't just judging. Some were curious, others moved. A few even smiled. The orchestra played a slow waltz. Maria's movements were hesitant at first, but Ethan, calm and patient, guided her gently. There was grace in her steps, natural, honest. It wasn't the polished style of debutantes, but something real. "Thank you," Maria said softly as they turned. "This means more than you can imagine." Ethan nodded. "It means more to me too." And for the first time in years, surrounded by wealth and formality, Ethan felt something different, a sense of purpose beyond foundations and boardrooms. The morning after the gala, photos of Ethan Monroe dancing with Emily Sanchez had spread like wildfire. Social media, local news outlets, even a segment on morning television called it the most unexpected moment of the season. Some praised Ethan for his humanity. Others questioned his judgment. But inside the Monroe Foundation and the Waldorf staff halls, the reaction was more complicated. At the hotel, whispers followed Maria through the corridors. "So she danced with the boss now? Wonder how long until she's promoted to something else." The tone wasn't curiosity. It was suspicion wrapped in jealousy. For the first time in her career, Maria didn't feel invisible, but she didn't feel safe either. Emily faced her own challenges. At school, some classmates congratulated her. Others mocked her. "Future CEO, huh?" someone said sarcastically in the hallway. The sudden spotlight was both thrilling and terrifying. Ethan, meanwhile, pushed forward. He met with his board and proposed the new scholarship initiative: travel stipends for underprivileged students competing in national academic events. He expected some hesitation, but not resistance. Richard Beck and 2 other board members argued fiercely. "This isn't what the foundation was built for," Richard said. "You're turning a centuries-old charity into a personal pet project. Be careful, Ethan. Emotions are not a strategy." Ethan stood his ground. "No, but empathy is." Tensions grew. Ethan sensed a divide forming inside his own foundation. Claire Whitmore tried to smooth things over in private. "Ethan, you need to be careful. This girl and her mother, they're lovely, but people talk, and donors might walk." The conversation hit a nerve. Later that week, Maria was called into Human Resources. She was told, politely but firmly, that an internal review had been opened into boundary concerns related to professional conduct. They weren't firing her, yet. But the message was clear. Keep quiet. Keep low. She left the office trembling, feeling humiliated. When she told Ethan, she was near tears. "Please don't defend me anymore. I just wanted Emily to have one beautiful night. We don't belong in that world. And pretending we do is making everything worse." Ethan didn't know how to respond. For the first time since the gala, he questioned whether his actions had made life harder for them instead of better. Emily, overhearing the conversation, was furious. "So we're supposed to stay quiet? Stay small? That's what they want. People like us aren't supposed to shine." Her voice cracked. And then the worst news came. The foundation's board voted, behind closed doors, to delay implementation of the new scholarship program indefinitely. The official statement cited resource allocation concerns and lack of structure. But Ethan knew exactly what it was: punishment. He sat alone in his office that night, staring at the city skyline through the glass. He thought about his wife, Grace, about all the galas they attended, about how she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen after dinner. "You can't run a foundation with spreadsheets alone," she once said. "Sometimes people just need to be seen." Then, there was a knock on the door. His assistant handed him a letter. No sender, just folded paper in a schoolgirl's handwriting. "Dear Mr. Monroe, thank you for seeing me that night. Not just for dancing or dinner, but for treating me like I mattered. I never expected anything. Please don't fight with your people because of us. Just know that even if nothing else happens, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Emily." Ethan held the letter in his hand for a long time, longer than any financial report, longer than any speech he'd given. That same night, he made a decision. The next morning, he called a press conference. No one saw it coming. Media outlets gathered quickly. The headline from the night of the gala had already gone viral. Now, curiosity piqued. Rumors swirled. Was he stepping down? Canceling the foundation? Donating everything? Ethan stood before the cameras, hands steady. "I created the Monroe Foundation to honor my family's name, but somewhere along the way, I forgot the people we were supposed to help. Last week, I danced with a young girl named Emily, and I remembered what it means to believe in someone." He paused. The room was quiet. "Today, I'm launching the Grace Initiative, named after my late wife. It will be fully independent, privately funded, and focused on creating opportunities for students and workers who are overlooked, like Emily and Maria." Gasps, flashes from cameras. Board members fidgeted. "If the current board of Monroe Foundation cannot support this vision, I understand. But I will no longer seek their approval." In a modest apartment across town, Maria and Emily watched the live stream on a borrowed tablet. Emily gripped her mother's hand. Maria tried not to cry. She failed. Ethan finished his speech with one last sentence. "Sometimes one dance can change everything." The announcement of the Grace Initiative sent ripples through New York's philanthropic circles. Some called it bold, others called it reckless, but no one could ignore it. Overnight, Ethan Monroe went from being a distant billionaire to a symbol of change. And true to his word, the Grace Initiative began its work almost immediately. The first scholarship awarded was to Emily Sanchez. With travel, lodging, and competition fees fully covered, she flew to Chicago for the National STEM Fair. Among the top 100 student finalists from across the country, she placed second, winning both a trophy and the attention of several university scouts. But more than that, she came back with confidence. Real confidence. "I always thought kids like me couldn't be part of something big," she said during a local interview. "Now I know better." Meanwhile, Maria was invited to participate in a new pilot program funded by the initiative, a small business incubator for hospitality workers with entrepreneurial ideas. Nervous, she hesitated. "I'm not a businesswoman. I'm a janitor," she told Ethan. "No," he replied gently. "You're someone who's managed life with nothing but strength. That's a better qualification than most MBAs I know." With mentorship, support, and a micro-grant, Maria founded Shine and Rise Cleaning Services. Within 6 months, she had hired 5 employees, other working mothers like her, and was contracting with mid-size offices and local community centers. She offered flexible hours, decent pay, and, something rare in her field, respect. The Waldorf quietly invited her to bid for a recurring contract. People started to notice. At the next year's spring gala, now co-hosted by the Grace Initiative and renamed in Grace Monroe's honor, the crowd looked different. Sure, there were still gowns and tuxedos, but also teachers, scholarship recipients, hotel workers, and community leaders. For once, the room felt honest. Ethan stood at the center, but not alone. On his left was Maria, wearing a navy blue gown, her hair neatly tied back. On his right, Emily, now 17, in a dress she had sewn herself. Dark green, simple and elegant. When the orchestra played the first waltz, all eyes turned to Ethan. This time he didn't hesitate. He walked over to Maria, offered his hand, and said, "May I?" She smiled, her nerves replaced with quiet pride. "I thought you'd never ask." They danced under the golden lights of the ballroom, not for appearances, not for legacy, but for what they had built together. As they turned across the floor, people clapped, not politely, but with feeling. From the edge of the room, Emily watched, her smile wide. She wasn't that shy girl anymore. She had just submitted her early application to MIT. After the dance, Ethan took the stage. "A year ago," he began, "I thought dancing again would dishonor my wife's memory. I thought moving forward meant leaving her behind. But then I met two people who showed me something different." He looked toward Maria and Emily. "Maria reminded me that strength is often silent, and Emily reminded me how powerful it is when someone truly sees you." Applause erupted. He continued, "The Grace Initiative isn't just a program. It's a promise that no one, no matter their zip code, job title, or bank balance, should be overlooked." That night, the gala raised a record-breaking amount in donations, but more importantly, it changed conversations across the city. Other foundations began examining their outreach. Corporations launched internal scholarship programs. And Ethan? He kept showing up, not just to events, but to classrooms, startups, and student showcases. Maria, once afraid to speak in public, was invited to share her story at a women's entrepreneurship panel in Brooklyn. She stood on stage in front of 200 strangers and told them the truth. "I was invisible for a long time. I scrubbed floors no one noticed. But then, someone looked at me like I mattered. And I realized I always did." The room stood to applaud. Emily, now a high school senior, continued working on her robotics project. Her new design, a lightweight walking aid with real-time navigation, earned her national recognition. At one conference, she was introduced as the girl who danced her way to innovation. She laughed, then corrected the host. "Actually, I just had someone who believed I could." Ethan, transformed by the experience, found new purpose in listening. No longer the silent man at the edge of the ballroom, he had become someone who opened doors and left them open for others to walk through. Now, whenever someone asks him what happened that night, he smiles. "She just wanted to see the dance," he says, "and ended up teaching me how to live again." And to you, watching this story unfold, have you ever felt unseen? Do you know someone with talent, heart, and no one to believe in them? Tell us in the comments. Share their name. Share their dream. Because sometimes, one small chance, one quiet gesture, one dance can change everything. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and follow our channel. Here, we honor the stories that deserve to be seen.